Crucial show now. It's after Apple's Tim Cook yesterday said that India could be the next China in the smartphone market. Another US corporation, Caterpillar Inc., that is the world's largest construction and equipment company, has echoed similar sentiments for the group's construction business. Caterpillar's global group president, Thomas Pillett, told me in an interview earlier today that India is one of the bright spots for the construction giant and will make the country an export hub, at least for markets like Africa and the Middle East. Its increased India focus is interesting because this comes at the backdrop of Caterpillar witnessing a steady revenue decline for the last 4 years, which has in fact forced the company to undergo some very painful restructuring that involves laying off 15,000 people since 2012 and shutting down at least 15 manufacturing plants across the globe. Also, the company's high-growth market, China, has significantly slowed down, and now Caterpillar's volumes in that country has in fact plummeted almost 80% since the highs of 2011-2012. So with that context in mind, I sat down with Thomas, and this is what he had to tell me. Thank you very much, Tom, for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. It's good to have you in India.
It's good to be here.
You know, people say that if you want to sort of know how an economy is doing, find out how Caterpillar is doing, because you're like the typical barometer for an economy. So tell us, in terms of how is the India economy looking, because you literally have your ears to the ground.
Yeah, so if you look at our global business, construction has been through a couple of challenging years. So typically the 13 and 14 period were stable in construction globally, but 15 was a significant downturn, and this year is also a struggle. But there are some bright spots around the world, and one of those bright spots is India. So of course you're looking from a different base, but we're seeing strong industry growth in infrastructure construction in India, and that's part of the reason I'm here. Is we're looking for areas of growth, and this is one of them. So we're optimistic about our business in India for 2016.
You're pretty much echoing what many of the agencies globally have also been re-emphasizing. The IMF also recently said that India is the lone bright spot in an otherwise gloomy global economy. So you're finding the same, so it's sort of resonating with a company like Caterpillar.
Right. I first started coming to India back in the 2000-2001 time frame, and I remember the growth rates. This was a period as China grew to double-digit GDP growth rates, and there were several economies in Southeast Asia that had strong growth rates, but I think India at the time was in the 5 to 6% range, and now growing to 7.5% is what the latest data from IMF is. It's a strong growth rate, maybe the strongest among all major economies around the world. And you compare it to growth rates in Europe or the US or even now China down in the 6.5% range. It says a lot of positive things about where India is headed, and of course we're focused on infrastructure and construction markets, mining, etc. And this is an area where there continues to be growth, whereas other areas are in decline.
Caterpillar has been in India for many years now, but would it be fair to assume that perhaps you're most optimistic now about the possibilities in India as opposed to in the past?
Yeah, we've been here active since the 1930s, and our competition has been here a long time as well. It's been a developing economy over the past decades. We really came here in earnest in the 1980s and started manufacturing with some partners, and now we've grown to, together with our dealers, a workforce of around 10,000 people. We have 5 manufacturing facilities. We have a large team of R&D employees as well. And I think we will continue to look at expanding that presence, not only for the growth domestically in India, but also using our manufacturing base. We have a great team of employees here. They're building world-class product, and we're able to actually export from India as well. So we're very optimistic about this market, and
then do you see India emerging as some sort of a regional export hub for Caterpillar?
Well, certainly we have a big presence here, and of course we have a big presence in other key construction markets like China, Brazil, the U.S. and some of the European countries. But I would say we will look to continue to grow in India. We're successful here. and we will look to export out of India, for example, to markets like Africa and the Middle East.
So India will be the market.
Well, one of the suppliers of equipment, for example, to Africa and the Middle East. And of course, you know, part of our strategy has been to, if you look back decades ago, Caterpillar was predominantly a U.S. company, U.S. manufacturer. We see ourselves as a global company, and it's been very beneficial to have a major manufacturing presence in places like Brazil, Europe, Japan, China, India as well, because we want to build product close to our customers, be responsive to their needs, and then it also helps, you know, from a currency perspective, because, you know, currencies change, markets change, and if you're in one place, it can be absolutely detrimental from a currency perspective. So a balanced footprint is important.
Right. It's important you say that, Thomas, and also in terms of the importance India market is gaining for Caterpillar globally, because if you look at the way in which your revenues have been under pressure over the last 3 years, it's been coming down every year, and your main market, China, which is one of your largest markets, is also now showing, you know, and you've also said in the past that the growth levels you've seen in 2011, 2012 is not possible in the near future. Yeah. Brazil is tanking. So in that case, then India is perhaps one of, you know, a major market which is actually not just maintaining its growth, but it's growing pretty high. 30% is what it grew last year.
Yeah, so if you look at those major markets around the world for construction, you know, China was a tremendous market in the 2011-2012 timeframe. Last year in 2015, the industries there were about 80% off of peak. You know, we've seen a little bit of maybe a bottoming in China, and if you look at the industry data, it's maybe going to be a little bit up in 2016, but it's definitely way off of peak. Brazil, as you mentioned, is stressed. The U.S. market is fairly strong in construction, but it's suffering on the petroleum side, and Europe has had fairly slow growth rates. So I say to my boss, you know, Doug Oberhelman, our chairman, you know, we're in our 4th consecutive year of revenue decline, so I'm looking for bright spots. But certainly, you look at the data, you look at the investment that your government is making in infrastructure, which is fantastic. And generally, when you see good infrastructure investment, it's positive for a people, for an economy. You know, certainly India will be a bright spot. It's, as I mentioned, it's a different base in terms of those growth rates from a China or a U.S. market, but still, you know, we're hopeful it'll grow to be a significant part of the global construction market.
For Caterpillar.
For Caterpillar, and for our competitors. They're here as well.
All right. Because yesterday Tim Cook had said about Apple that India could be the next China.
Yeah.
So, you know, even though India is far away, I mean, even though India is the largest growing smartphone market in the world, but he said that going forward, India could be the next China. So in case of Caterpillar, do you see that, you know, going forward, considering the reasons you've enumerated, that India could reach in the future closer to the volumes you've seen in China?
Yeah, so China was an extremely large construction industries market. It grew to be the largest in the world in 2012. It's come down now, and the U.S. is probably a larger market. But certainly with the growth rates we're seeing, and with the discussion from your government, you know, today they're saying they're building 20 kilometers of roads per day. Grow that to 30, and looking out to 2020, 100 kilometers per day. With those kind of growth rates, the need for construction, the need for ports and airports, you know, certainly my expectation is that India will be in the top construction markets of the world as we look out to 2020. The potential is there.
All right.
So
a word also on the Narendra Modi government. I mean, considering you are the world's largest construction manufacturing company, what's your sense in terms of the regulatory and the business environment? Is your India team telling you that things have perceptibly changed on the ground in the last 20-odd months?
Well, if you look at the GDP growth rates, you know, a lot can be said about how an economy is doing and how the government's functioning. I did, you know, meet with some ministers today. In fact, I met with 3 different ministers. I noticed a difference from 10 or 15 years ago in terms of, you know, the speed. They want to be able to move. They want to reduce bureaucracy. They want to allow investment. You know, discussion about PPPs, discussion about BOT type structures in contracts. That's all very positive. I like the style, so when I sat down with the ministers today, there was not a lot of chit-chat. It was like, okay, what do you want to talk about? What can we do to move things forward? So I notice a difference in the government, and I think there's a buzz in the air that I didn't feel 10 or 15 years ago. So I think, and the local team here for Caterpillar is confirming that.
All right. And a few last questions then, Thomas. What is your team telling you also in terms of the opportunities you're seeing in areas like defense, the railways, where you've been a long-time supplier to the railways, where many people may not even be aware of this. So in terms of these areas, what are the kind of opportunities that's opening up?
What other kind of opportunities? Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned the traditional ones. I mean, I think we've been here on the rail side since the 1950s. That's not an area of my responsibility. But when we look at, defense is another one. We're very active in terms of ports, dredging equipment, waterways, dams, bridges, roads, all typical areas that you would say for Caterpillar. We're very active on the mining side, which there's a lot of activity, particularly with coal in India. And I think the energy and transportation part of our business, whether you talk about rail is part of that, but you talk about power generation. And then we have a gas turbine division as well. They're all active and present here in India. So we are a broad equipment and solutions provider to those main segments, and I think we can participate and be supportive of India's growth across the broad spectrum of equipment and solutions needs. So, and we've got 2 strong dealer partners here. And of course that product support is very, very important. So we're optimistic about the future.
And is India entrenched part of your global supply chain?
Absolutely. In fact, that's part of when I mentioned building out our manufacturing base and continuing to invest in our manufacturing here. Part of that is also the supply chain development.
Well, that was Tom Pillett in conversation with me. Pretty interesting, especially at a time when it's scaling down its growth forecast globally. It's stepping up its forecast, and its optimism levels for India has gone up.